So, Hari, first, before I start the interview, can you please pronounce your entire name so when I do the intro, I won't sound like an idiot?
No, so my name's Hariharasudhen, but you can call me Hari.
Okay, so Hari, you're an electrical engineer,
Yeah.
but you're also a filmmaker. How does one balance both careers? And how did you come up with that big plan to actually have two careers with, I'm assuming, filmmaking being a huge passion of yours?
Yeah, no, I was interested in films like only around 2020, like tried to actually write and maybe direct only around the 2020 time. So I had to see what I could do. I enrolled in some film classes. I went to UCLA Extension to pursue screenwriting first, but I felt that I'm not like so good at this. So let me just try directing. If I'm not good at directing, well, let me just go back to engineering. So I tried directing. I feel that I could understand visuals, the meaning behind visuals, and slowly it ended up making short films. I screwed up in a couple of them, and I was like, okay, so what's next? How am I going to get better? But then I found a way to make a professional looking short film, but it fell short in writing. Then I said, okay, now let me just see what I can do with respect to writing, and then started seeking material where the writing was good fundamentally, but yeah, I had to do a lot of trial and error based short films, and not trial and that's the wrong term to use, but at least like I knew I was directing okay, but in terms of the writing, I wasn't really sure if this is working or not. That's when Tether happened. Like I made a bunch of short. Okay, I think this is enough, and I read the script of Tether, and I thought, let me just make this. But with respect to the short film, the time wasn't a problem right? Because you could do on a weekend, you don't have to like worry so much about the work aspect. But here, this was also happening. This had to be filmed at least for 5 to 7 days. Yeah. So I think days I'll be during the daytime, I'll just be doing my day job. And during nights, weekends, I would be like focusing on the work related to the film. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. It's a great story. Hari, I was just wondering, you started in 2020 when you thought about becoming a director. And you talked about having a very good visual sense. Did you always have a good visual sense as a child, which made you confident in 2020? Or maybe you didn't, and on 2020, what made you continue to have confidence in your visuals?
So I did try photography sometime in 2011, 2012, but again, like I didn't know what would be for a good photo and stuff, to be honest. I did a bunch of things where, I tried, but I failed and I felt I'm not talented enough or whatever. But I think in 2020, something I felt, I watched Goodwill Hunting and I felt that let me just know a little bit more about writing. I tried writing and I failed. But with respect to the visual aspect, I read a book. I think it's called Eye for Film. In that book, each shot they just show a shot and they just explain the meaning behind each shot. And I was like, I think maybe the first few shots I was just reading the explanation. But after that, I started understanding the meaning behind each shot, like by myself. And I just then checked the answers. Okay, yeah, whatever I thought and whatever this person's explaining was fine. So let me just try doing this with every film. I could slowly start understanding the meaning. And then I did like a small video essay that actually ended up being viral for on Twitter. And that's for a Tamil film. Tamil is my mother tongue. So I was like, okay, so whatever I'm saying, people are agreeing. And I'm like, okay, maybe let me just try. It's okay if I make mistakes. Let me just go bonkers with my theory and stuff. And then after a point, I felt, okay, the writing didn't work. Okay, there's directing. Let me just try this. Let me just see the understanding that I have about visuals. Can I like extend this to editing? Can I just extend this to another department? So I learned directing that way. So
That question leads me to Tether, and which I find very interesting because your scene breakdown had at least a lot of it. It's pretty much most of your narrative is very dialogue exposition heavy. So it has to be strong on the visuals. And I don't know how much budget you had. I think I was reading, you said 5 to 7 days. Maybe the shoot is overall 10 days. How are you able to visualize your scenes to make it interesting? Because for it to be interesting, it has to be, even though it's really dialogue heavy, you must make it really convincing on visual sense. How did you go about that with your shot list and whatnot in preparation?
I think with each scene, what I wanted to do was I wanted to push myself a little bit. I think I knew with this kind of film, you don't want to have too much of camera movement. This is a film that's highly driven by writing as well as the performances. But I think like even on the edit, we kind of tried making this more plot driven, try to change few things in the edit. But I think fundamentally this is about writing and performances. I didn't want the direction to be like, oh, look at this guy directing it. I really didn't want. I also felt initially when people start out as filmmakers, there'll be a lot of camera movement. But I think as their careers progress, I think camera starts becoming more and more very. That's an observation that I made, and I felt this film deserves that static kind of composition because these characters remain still. They don't want to move on. So I think not having too much of camera movement would help with the making. But on a fundamental, each scene, I thought, what can I do differently as a director here? Like, for example, if you note, like the first scene where we see Paula, we have the camera placed at eye level with the child, where the parents are actually listening to what she wants to say. This continues even with the birthday sequence later on, where the camera is at eye level with the daughter. But when they move into the new house, the camera kind of has the same position as adults' eye level. The daughter looks smaller, and you even the blocking, you have the mother in front and you have the father taking the camera. So the child is kind of left behind. So these are things that I didn't want to do with movement, but just with still frames, what can you achieve with the blocking? Small things like these, I wanted to try with each scene to show that the character's state. Another example I want to give is you have Gerald always Bradbury in the opening scene. You would have like his own single. You have a single on Bradbury, but when Gerald finally decides to open up, you have a slight movement of the camera from a single to an OTS, showing that Gerald finally connects with Bradbury. It's slightly embarrassing to explain these choices, but it's just these things that I try doing it at each scene just to not for people to notice or anything. It is just for me as a director to ask, okay, what did you do? That's going to slightly elevate in terms of the interaction between these characters. We tried doing this on a sound design level. We tried doing this on a music level just to see. Again, this is all as people who are trying to create something. What am I bringing to this story? What am I doing differently? Because, like you said, it's highly dialogue and highly like maybe performance. But as a director, how do we communicate through visual language? The connection between these characters was something that I wanted to explore. And
Yeah, you mentioned connecting through visual language. That said, your actors in this movie give a really good performances, each of them. How were you able to connect with them when each of them, they're just different people? How have you learned to communicate with different actors within the framework of your project and make sure they give the best performances possible? Are you really hands-on, or does it really depend on the actor you're working with?
I think in this film, we especially because we didn't have too much time on our hands, I did a bunch of rehearsals with them. So there was like a reading session with Leonard as well as Amanda. There was a reading session with Bradbury as well as Gerald. So that way, like when they did the rehearsal, they got into the characters. They knew what the scene was about. We just discussed what the scene's about, what's working for them, what's not working for them. We would also go over the blocking and everything. Would there be any movement? Would there not be any movement? Stuff like that. Yeah, no, that way when they came on set, they were well prepared. They knew what it was about. So we'll just do like a basic blocking rehearsal on how there's going to be movement in the scene between the actors. And then we'll just go and they'll go and do their makeup. The DP will do the lighting and we'll then have them arrive on the set and we'll just film. So it was a very organized process. There was no problem on set at all. Everything that we planned, we ended up doing. No ego, nothing. In terms of just getting the people to act, I think they were all really nice. I think they really understood the essence of the story. We did like multiple rounds of casting. These people were the best from the ones that we auditioned. I think we were doing there was a SAG strike during that time. So we couldn't really go for union actors as well. So we had to find within non-union actors. But I'm not talking highly of the actors or anything. I love their performances. It's very grounded, it's very rooted. But I think they did a great job, to be honest. I think they all fit their parts really well.
Hari, were you ever nervous about tackling? It's a strong script. Were you ever nervous about tackling such a very tragic and serious subject, or maybe not? Because although the subject itself is very hard to tackle, there's a universal theme about moving on from one's tragedy because everyone has to ultimately learn how to move on no matter what, or maybe they don't. So, can you speak to that?
No, I think when I read the script, I think I connected more with the family, to be honest. I think it is not a happy family that got into this tragedy. It was a very complex family. I think the father had issues with the mother had issues with the father. The daughter had her own perspective about her parents. That's what makes this family very unique. It's not just like a happy family getting into that itself is bad, but I'm just saying there's a lot of complexity, a lot of layers involved with this. And at that time, I think I connected with it as a third person. But what made this personal for me was I had a roommate with whom I wasn't getting along, like a mate who lived across my room, and that person I think was 60 years old, if I'm not wrong. And whenever we had these problems, like he would go and complain to the owner. When he said, when I complain, he was like, "You're not going to complain about me to the owner," but he went and complained. Every day it felt very unsafe. We were sharing the same restroom and stuff, so it was like I had that fear. What if he possessed a gun? And I would like, what's something going to happen? And I vacated the house for that reason. I didn't feel safe there. And I think that's when I was reading this story and I felt, you know what? Maybe this is the thing that made it personal for me. What's going to happen for me? And I started realizing, am I really feeling safe here? I think that took me to this stage, but I think as a filmmaker, I feel I can handle these kind of heavy subjects because I am used to watching heavy films. I've always wondered when watching them, whatever impact that creates on me, I want the same impact to be created on the audience. So I need to be mentally strong when telling these stories rather than kind of having that emotion, which I think it's maybe later on when the film's done, everything we could feel about it. But when making the film and there's that process going on, I think it's important to be focused on the job, the story you're trying to tell.
And on the story you're trying to tell, or the story that you've already told, what's it like to have your movie over at the festival? Can you just talk about how our listeners can watch your film? Because it's a pretty great fest.
So yeah, so about the festival Dances with Films, I think one of the things when I made this film, I made this without expecting even a single dollar in return. That is really the honest truth. If I wanted to earn even few dollars out of it, I would have made a horror film or a comedy film. It's going to get me money. But I made a film that is like, it leaves you with hope, but I think the subject matter is in such a way that it is going to be hard hitting. When I made the film, I thought the people whom I expected to receive well, like the expect them to receive this film, I think they didn't respond because there's no star cast, there's no A-list director, there's no A-list here in this film. But and that kind of like slightly disappointed me. I felt that I expected. But I guess this is the thing about being a first-time director. You think the world is a certain way. You expect things to be like, okay, they'll have the same reaction about something just like you, but it doesn't work like that. That's the lesson that I learned. But what really pleasantly surprised me about Dances with Films, this is only I got to know after the selection, is they also love independent films. They also love to promote storytellers, stories over being a vehicle for stars to have their premiere. It's very easy for a festival to promote these talents. It's because that's how the world's heading. People want to have access to stars. People want normalcy. But I think this festival, they are ready to take risks. They are ready to back people who have different voices. I'm not saying I'm different or anything, but I'm just saying that from the films that are selected, there are 36 world premieres happening on during this Dances with Films. That's an insane number when they none of them have stars involved. So that's a great thing. So when their sensibilities and mine match, I feel so confident and comfortable being able to premiere with them. Yeah, so it's going to premiere on Sunday, June 22nd, 6:30 p.m. at Dances with Films at TCL Chinese Theatre.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I have one more question. You mentioned earlier in 2020, you mentioned watching Good Will Hunting and being inspired. For our listeners and watchers, can you name another film that inspires you as a filmmaker to carry on as an artist, and what makes this movie so special for you?
So you want me to talk about Good Will Hunting or the other film?
Oh, just another movie recommendation that you would like.
So I love Social Network a lot because again, I think it's Sorkin. It's filled with dialogues. But I think what Fincher does so well is he doesn't make you notice the directing in the film, which is amazing. And you every time when you watch the film or you watch a reel on Instagram, somebody would notice something about that film. And you're like, wow, okay, so he did this with this film. There's a lot to learn from that film on how you don't think about the director when watching the film. It's a Sorkin film and it's so beautifully directed. that's a way, I think that's also a great way to let the writing take the center stage on a film without having the director explicitly showing he did the work, but he actually did a lot of work on that. So that's a film that I always used to like. There was a phase where I was always like, Social Network is the greatest film ever made and stuff like that. But I was like there. So yeah, that phase.
And Hari, one more thing. Just thanks again for your time. With all the work that you put in for Tether, how much more encouraged are you to direct your next film? Has it really propelled you to keep on continuing your directing career?
Definitely. I'm obviously encouraged to like, I'm trying to now, I did do directing, but I think the phase after the film where it was in post production and submitted to festivals, I was getting restless. And obviously, I didn't have the money to make another film, right? So I wanted to start writing and I started writing stuff. And I'm writing a bunch of Tamil films. Like Tamil is my mother tongue. There's an Indian industry in India, so I'm trying to write a bunch of Tamil films. So that's the process that's going on right now. Yeah. So at this moment, but here at right now, if I was to get, I think I'll be more comfortable directing in US because I'm not so well versed in culture. But with respect to Indian films, I want to keep going as an artist in some form. So I think learning to write or trying to write every day is giving me that feeling of doing something every day, being able to contribute something. So
All right. Thanks again. And congratulations on Tether.
thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care.